Hello and welcome to the SciFirst MovieTalk episode. So in this episode, I will be discussing the 2019 animated sequel, that is, the Angry Birds movie 2, as directed by Thurop van Orman and, of course, based on the popular Rovio entertainment gaming series Angry Birds, and following on from the events of the first movie, 2016's The Angry Birds movie. So before I get started with this review, I just want to give a big shout out to Infobolt, who requested this review a little while ago. Infobolt is a YouTuber offering some interesting fact-based videos, showcasing some little known and intriguing facts about many everyday and random objects. So, if you have the chance to check out their channel, I will leave a link to Infobolt, I'll leave a link to an Infobolt episode at the end of this review, and we'll also place a link to their channel in the video description below. In terms of the movie, as stated, this is based somewhat on the Rovio Entertainment Gaming series. So very quickly, for those of you who aren't familiar with the game, at the risk of repeating myself from my first review, it's quite simple, really. As I did state in my review for the first movie, go watch that. There are these pigs who are looking to steal your eggs. They have a series of different birds, each with their unique abilities, and you have to kind of strategically slingshot these birds across the screen in order to remove the piggies who have taken residence in your area and want your eggs. It is actually quite an addictive game, as it does require an amount of skill and perseverance in order to get that slingshot just right, and many levels can take many frustrating hours to complete. So, that was basically the premise of the first movie. That's it. However, this movie, the second one, the second to be released based on the game, deviates from this concept somewhat and has the birds and pigs now working together to defeat a common enemy, intent on taking over both of their islands. So we then catch up with the gang from the first movie. So we've got Red, as voiced by Jason Sudeikis, Chuck, the yellow bird, as voiced by Josh Gad, and Bomb, as voiced by Danny McBride. We find them thwarting new and ever more ludicrous attacks from the pigs in a game of island warfare, with the piggy leader, King Leonard, as voiced by Bill Hader, taking particular aim at Red, who does fancy himself as the saviour of Bird Island, keeping an ever-watchful eye over the pigs and keeping Bird Island safe from their hijinks. However, Leonard looks to call a truce with the birds, and seek their help when Piggy Island is attacked by a group of eagles living on a newly discovered third island. This one an ice-covered wastelands, with its inhabitants ruled by one particularly sinister and diabolical eagle, Zeta, as voiced by Leslie Jones, looking to find a more exotic home on Bird and Piggy Islands respectively. So, putting their differences and rivalries aside, both the pigs and the birds work together to infiltrate Eagle Island to stop Zeta's plans and relocate to warmer climes, namely the other islands. So, unlike the first movie into the franchise, this one deviates somewhat from the premise of the game, which, to be fair, isn't 100% a bad thing. There's only so much that you could have done with the ideas brought forth in the games, I know, but I think along the way, some of the elements which I loved in the first movie, such as the throwbacks to the games themselves, the characters' special abilities, and the way that the kind of landscapes were used, were lost in this movie as it got into its stride. And I think that overall made this movie less Angry Birds and a little more of a generic animation. In the end, the fact that these characters came from Angry Birds didn't really seem to matter anymore. That's not to say that this wasn't a fun movie. So, hold on. In fact, at times, it was hilarious. Absolutely. And dare I say it, even had some decent toilet humour for what it was, It was still a very vibrant, very colourful and peppy movie. Very much in keeping with the original. Although at times I did feel that this one was more laboured, I think, in its execution of its plot. The trade-up being that the jokes and the humour felt less forced than they did in the original movie. This time round being much more character-centred. In this, it did seem to have kind of less awkward humour, let's say, and certainly felt less abrasive. It wasn't as blunt, nor even sometimes as obvious as its predecessor, but there are still plenty of slapstick moments to be had, you know? You could tell right from the start, though, that they really wanted to move away from the typical gaming elements. Most of the classic Angry Birds antics were condensed within the opening scenes. You know, the pigs and the birds still at war, with each retaliation getting more and more ludicrous, you know, and with the birds fully embracing the use of the slingshot as a mode of travel. But thereafter, along the way, we do kind of seem to lose the piggy and bird bravado, you know? They almost end up being very generic cartoon characters. We end up losing some of what made them unique characters, you know? And by the end, I could have been just watching any other film, really, you know? These birds aren't angry enough. They're not really angry birds in this movie. It was a shame that it was only really Chuck and Bomb that really got to show any skills. There were very little throwbacks to any of the movies or moves, or elements in the games. Not quite as much of the classic trademark style. Quite a lot of the other characters in the games as well, really, just showed for name's sake only, you know? The musical themes in the game, or used in the game, also suffer. They're great to start with, and they're here mixed into the main intro scenes. But they're nowhere near as prominent this time around. You really do get the feeling they wanted to distance themselves from the game, and everything about the film just flows in that direction, including the music. I mean, the soundtrack's great. In fact, it is right up my street. It plays like an 80s come 90s power mixtape, but not reminiscent of Angry Birds, you know, or any of the other games in the series. I did get the feeling that they did try to appeal to an older audience using the music by kind of cramming it full of old songs and pop culture references from the 80s, 90s and the early 2000s. I think that's where they were going with it. But there were quite a few additions to the cast, and this time around with a fantastic selection of new characters, which in terms of the story presented, it did actually work really quite well, I thought. The story was a bit more disjointed than we got in the first movie, but it did try to be a bit more adventurous. That this time, it did kind of really play like a series of cartoons pieced together, though, and not all of the elements actually moved that story along. We had the introduction of the hatchlings and their antics, totally cute. Yes, with their eyes and everything, yeah. But they were used mainly as filler material, in a very similar way to the squirrel in Ice Age, shall we say. Its emulation of the techniques used in some of the other big franchises, such as Ice Age and indeed Minions, is really very obvious in this movie, to be honest. We did also have some new pig characters, and they kind of fleshed out the cast, along with the introduction of a new antagonist. And not to forget to mention the introduction of Silver, as voiced by Rachel Bloom, Chuck's sister, the new brains of the outfit. Indeed, one thing that is noticeable, given the deviation away from the game's main premise, is that you can tell, to be fair, that they were having a lot more fun with the characters and these new ideas and what they could do with them, you know, and that really did shine through in the film. That was an enjoyable thing to see. They certainly do expand on the worlds that we encountered in the first movie, and certainly provide more scope for future installments, and I do hope we get one, you know? It has a bigger sense of adventure overall, but this does mean that we really don't spend too much time on any one of the islands specifically, you know? Especially not Piggy Island, which is a real shame, as we didn't get too much time on there in the first movie. I would have certainly liked to have seen much more of their worlds for sure, you know? That would have been excellent. But overall, this time around, we get more of an original story, which is good in one hand, but the deviation away from the game's premise, for me, at least, and the way that the story was told overall really did mean that it lost a bit of focus. Again, given the amount of filler material used in the movie, there's probably only really about 20 to 30 minutes of good story altogether, you know? It is great to see the original cast return, and this does breathe an air of familiarity. It was enjoyable to see how these characters have kind of further developed since the last outing, but we really didn't get to see enough of the other characters, you know, the other classics, with the three bluebirds, even some of the other hatchlings and things that were there. In favour this time around, really, for the introduction of the host of new characters, and indeed the new antagonist. I personally, if you haven't got that from this, I personally enjoyed the first Birds outing. You know, the Birds the Birds First outing more, you know? But I know that's not a popular opinion. Most people actually do like the second one more than the first. But for me, personally, it was about the small elements from the game that were included in the first that really made it what it was. But, indeed, this was still an absolutely fun, fresh and funny feel-good family film when all's said and done, and with more than enough comical moments to keep it entertaining. And is that not what we all ask for? So, that brings me to the end of this episode. Many thanks for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please leave a like. Please do hit that subscribe button for more movie reviews, trailer reactions and other movie-related content. Absolutely loved having you here at SciFirst MovieTalk, and we would definitely love to have you back. But most of all, just thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.